Staying on wars, a second round of direct peace talks between Russia and Ukraine has yielded no major breakthrough, but a deal to swap more prisoners of war was reached. Ukrainian negotiators say Russia has again rejected an unconditional ceasefire, which is a key demand by Kyiv and its allies in Europe and the US. Russia only committed to the return of the bodies of 12,000 soldiers and proposed a 2 to 3 day truce in certain areas of the front line of the war without giving further details. Today, Regional Military Administration of Ukraine's Sumy region says Russian forces reportedly attacked Ukraine's northeastern axis, killing at least three people and injuring about 20 others in 5 attacks. Authorities describe the condition of many victims as serious. The Ukrainian president is calling for more sanctions against Russia to ensure its commitment to a viable ceasefire deal. The latest reports say Ukraine has carried out an underwater attack on a Russian bridge in Crimea. Now, for more on the lingering war between Russia and Ukraine, global affairs analyst Ejike Okpa joins me virtually on the news. He joins me from the US. Good to have you join us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So let me get your thoughts on the second round of talks between Russia and Ukraine and just some of the initial agreements reached.
I want to prephrase my comment by saying, this is a case of asking for a pound of flesh without blood. The two sides have dug in, bringing in conditions or, demanding conditions that is hard for either side to agree to. And obviously that's going to make it harder to negotiate, because in negotiation, what you want to do, you want the parties to come in and be more flexible and be more accommodating in order to have terms and conditions met. But when they're asking for certain things that are almost impossible or has a very high degree of improbability, it's just not going to make it work. But who knows? They are on the second level of this 5-level discussion. Maybe something will happen to each side, and then they've decided to soften it, because so far it don't look like after these 5 levels or phases they're going to come to any terms.
And interesting you mentioned that. I just again want to list out some of the things that both sides are requesting. Some of the conditions for reaching a ceasefire, or not even ceasefire, peace talk, is one of them. For Russia, they want to maintain control of 4 Ukrainian regions and Crimea. They also want a regime change in Kyiv. They are also asking for no Ukrainian NATO membership. For Ukraine, they want a complete and unconditional ceasefire, release of prisoners, and return of abducted children, which some of what Ukraine is asking for have been agreed on at this initial talk. But when you look at what Russia is asking for, I mean, how realistic is that, and what compromise do you think that Ukraine should make?
That's what I'm saying. It's going to be hard for Ukraine, because it's basically you're surrendering. You want to be an independent country side by side with Russia, but you're telling them that the size of their army has to be capped. They have to agree not to join European Union or NATO. The language, Russian language, has to be recognized, and people in Ukraine that speak Russian language have to be given rights. So these are the things, again, that when you put it out there, it's like then Ukraine might as well fold itself into Russia, because none of those things any sovereign nation is going to agree to it, because you're no longer independent. And so Putin knows what he's doing, and again, when you go to negotiate and somebody's been unnecessarily intransigent, then it makes it harder. But who knows? The Ukrainians don't want it, and Zelensky is not going to agree to it. So what we're going to have is this ongoing war that I don't know what's going to bring an end to it.
So for you, is this having talks just for talk's sake, or do you think that both sides are actually committed to these talks?
But I mean, you could commit, but then are you resolving to end it? You know, they committed because they showed up in Turkey. But then the other thing is when you show up, then what are you showing up for? Are you showing up just for the showing up sake? Are you showing up to say, at the end of this conversation or the negotiation, I'm going to walk away with something that I can come back to and we improve on? I don't even think there's anything to improve on until the demands on both sides are, you know, sort of like, let's put it aside. Let's recognize each other as an independent nation. Let's exercise the choice of freedom we want to be, you know, be associated with. That's what's going to end it. But Russia doesn't want that because Ukraine being a member of NATO is going to just make it that if you attack Ukraine again, all the forces of NATO is going to come on top of Russia. And so that's the bone of contention. It has nothing to do with anything. But when you now have another country, so, oh, you can do this. Before you do it, you know, we have to approve it. And then Ukraine is saying, give us the land. Give us the land of our land that you have taken. And Russia said, no, we want to keep that. I mean, just look at it. It's just like in the case of a divorce. You really don't want the spouse to go, even though you have agreed to go. But just like I still want to, you know, have a string attached. It makes a relationship harder to develop. So the only thing that would do it is that both sides say, you know what, we have suffered enough on both sides. Let everybody keep what they have, and let me find the relationship that I want. Just as opposed to your ex telling you you can go find another relationship. Heck no, that makes it harder to survive.
So the U.S. president has also sort of acquiesced to some of these conditions that Russia has you know sort of put forward. I remember, if you remember, the infamous Oval Office meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump. He sort of also mentioned that Ukraine cannot join NATO and also cannot have its territories back. It would also seem as though that's where Russia seems to be getting that boldness from.
Well, I mean, Trump may have said that, and he did say it, but before then that was what is his name, you know, Putin had. Remember, this thing started in 2014 when Crimea was taken, Obama was the president. If you remember, there was a time, you know, Obama met with the then prime minister of Russia, and there was some sort of conversation that sneaked out because, you know, Obama didn't know the microphone was on. So it's what you see now is, you know, what, 15, 11 years of what, you know, Putin wanted, and he's achieving it. So Trump is saying, you know what, maybe this, Trump's angle is, hey, maybe this is what is going to allow peace to exist. But if you want peace, then you have to let go of some ego. Because again, there's a lot of ego here. There's a lot of pride. There's a lot of who's going to surrender. You know, Ukraine doesn't want to surrender. Russia doesn't want to surrender. So they just, you know, looking at each other and say, you know, if taking something from me, give it back. I can tell you, you know, there's a phrase we have in Texas. It's called, you know, come and take it. And this was when Texas and Mexico had a war, and Texas took something from them. Mexico said, give it to us. And Texas said, no, we're not. So that phrase became, come and take it. And they never, Mexico never showed up, and the state is still in Texas. So they have to get up to say, you know, there's this phrase of opportunity cost. What are you willing to give up? Everybody has an ego. At some point, you're going to say, you know what, this is beyond ego. I have destruction. I have people. I have families. I have civilians, women, children. I mean, look at, you have to release the children you've taken from us. So, I mean, what could be so wicked? You're taking somebody's children and you're holding on to it as something to make the other person give up. So I just think, let everybody take what they got. You know, and they say, okay, you know, let bygone be bygone. Let's just find a way to be, you know, good neighbors. Love thy neighbor. It's a very golden rule, but most people don't recognize what the benefits of that is.
Ukraine is asking for more sanctions on Russia. At some point, President Trump has also lashed out at the Russian president for lack of commitment, what he saw as lack of commitment to the talks. Do you think that somehow President Trump is also getting fed up of the Russian leader and how he is reacting or responding to the talks?
Of course, he's getting fed up. You know, he has put his reputation on the line, and now he's going to have to find a way to either withdraw from it. I think, you know, there was a recent statement that said America want to pull away from some of these nations that oftentimes you do stuff wanting America to get involved. We have our own domestic challenges, and so you got to focus on yourself. So what Trump is saying, Trump is frustrated. Trump has said, hey, if he was president when this thing started, he would never have started. We don't know whether that's true or not. But the point is that there's a lot of ego, and Russia, Putin is going to say, who are you to tell me what to do or what not to do? I'm going to fight for my country. And the Ukraine said, hey, I'm going to fight as well because I got support from other countries. But remember, if Ukraine were to be a member of NATO, this would have been a bigger war because now all the NATO stuff would have been brought to bear on their benefit. But since that is not the case, all they're doing is supplying them with arms. And then in terms of sanction, what other sanction are you going to do? I mean, the sanction hasn't worked, because it's not the first time they've put sanction on Russia, and then so what are you going to do this time? Remember the European nation, Germany, for instance, is heavily dependent on the oil and gas from Russia, and they cannot afford. That's why Germany is kind of on defense. They're not very aggressive on what it is they want to say or want to do. So Russia knows it. Russia has played this game. They know where to pinch Ukraine and where to pinch the European Union and the other European former USSR nations around. They are weak. A lot of them are aligning with Russia because they don't want what's going on with Ukraine to be on them. So everybody's more like, hey, the elephant in the room. How do we drag this elephant out of the room?
And I agree with you on Russia's extension of authority on the former USSR countries, especially when you look at the kind of elections in those countries and Russia's influence. But I also wanted to talk about these talks and how the war is escalating, even as the talks were on yesterday. Ukraine on its side has ramped up its military efforts far beyond the front lines. Is that significant enough to increase pressure on Moscow to return to the negotiating table?
No, not really. I mean, both sides have inflicted all sort of damages on the other. So it's really just like, okay, who's going to throw in the towel? Is it Russia? Is it Ukraine? So, even while the talk is going on, if there have been attacks in Russia, there have been attacks in Ukraine. I think there was a recent one where Ukraine sent in a drone and sort of crippled a lot of power supply to a part of Russia. So all those things are going on. It's not like while the talk is going on, the two sides are saying, no, let's have a temporary ceasefire. Basically, it is one of those things I say it's a personality context. It has nothing to do with who is getting what. It's just more like I've gotten myself into this and I don't even know how to pull out of it without egg on my face. So who is going to make that happen? Is it Trump? Is it European Union? Or is it the new Pope? Nobody has an answer to that. And so until both of them buy this value of opportunity cost, I'm going to give up this. Maybe it was taken from me when I was asleep. I'm going for the one that I have now. I'm going to make sure nobody else is going to take it from me. If they don't do that, I don't have any magic wand as to when this war is going to end. And sanction is not going to do anything. Because what the sanction is going to do is cause more problem for the less fortunate. The big people are always going to have a way to live a good life, even in the midst of crisis.
All right, let's talk about stay on these strikes by Ukraine. Do you think that, what message rather do you think also sends to President Trump? If you remember, during that meeting I mentioned earlier, President Trump had told President Zelensky that he has no card left to play. But it seems that they are now making, more inroads into Russia with these attacks.
Well, when he said he had no more card to play, it's like you have exhausted of your resources, both your goodwill as well as your weapon system. And so basically what that is like, hey, look to us coming to the table and say, okay, Russia, you get what you want, but I still want you to give me something in return. It goes down to what? Ego. That word ego is when it gets into personalities, it is harder to get it out of their head because everybody wants to say, I won. Remember that word, we win, you lost. Russia doesn't want to feel like they're going to lose, and Ukraine don't want to feel like they're going to lose. So, Trump is Trump. Trump is he's fortunate to have the microphone to say what he says, but it doesn't mean everything he says is going to be abided by other people. People are going to say, well, you say what you say, we're going to still do what we're going to do. And that is the challenge. I mean, the European Union have issued all kinds of statements and policies and try to go around supporting Ukraine, but it hasn't produced any outcome. We shouldn't all be excited about efforts. We should be excited about outcomes. What is the outcome? Is the outcome relevant to the effort? And is it making things to come to an end?
Thank you so much for your time. We are following that development there and see how both countries will progress in these peace talks. Always a pleasure to have you on. Global Affairs Analyst, Ejike Okpa.
Well, thank you for having me.